A millionaire found a crying baby at his door and took him home. Moments later, the millionaire fainted after reading the letter left with the baby. A busy morning in the central square of the city, where hurried people went about their ways, immersed in their own routines. In the midst of the crowd, Karina stood out discreetly. With a modest appearance, simple clothes, and a face marked by lines of fatigue and suffering, she observed from a distance, with an absorbed gaze, the movement around Briccio, a millionaire businessman known for his philanthropy. Briccio, with his impeccable attire and imposing presence, distributed bags of food to needy families. He radiated charisma and authority. His gestures were firm and confident, and his smile, though restrained, expressed a certain pleasure in helping. Karina, however, felt increasingly weak, and her vision slowly darkened as she struggled to remain standing. Does he know how much this means to these people? To me? To my child? Karina thought, feeling her body falter. Gradually, Karina's strength seemed to abandon her body, while the heavy air made each breath difficult. She tried to hold onto a nearby pole, but her fingers slipped, and she fell to the ground. In seconds, the murmur of the people around turned into a commotion. Briccio, who was finishing delivering one of the bags, noticed the movement and immediately went to her. He approached, carefully observing Karina's pale expression and closed eyes, while holding her wrist looking for signs of life. "She needs help now," he said, with a tone of genuine concern, looking at the security guards around. "Call an ambulance quickly," he ordered. Briccio knelt beside Karina, his brow furrowed in concern. He didn't know what had brought her to this state, but he felt an urgency to keep her awake, to make her fight to remain conscious until help arrived. Gently, he held one of her hands, cold and fragile, trying to convey some security. "Hey, look at me," Briccio requested in a low and soft tone. "Can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" Karina slowly opened her eyes, blinking as if trying to dispel the torpor that was taking over her body. Her breathing was weak, but she found the strength to whisper, "Karina, my name is Karina." Briccio nodded, remaining attentive to each of her movements. He wanted to do everything to keep the woman safe, to save her, and for that he tried to distract her with small talk and silly conversations. "Karina, it's a beautiful name." "I'm Briccio," he commented, giving a slight smile. "Tell me, what brought you here today? Did you come to get one of the bags?" She blinked again, her eyes shining with something between gratitude and sadness. "Yes, I just wanted to see." "I thought it was beautiful what you were doing," she answered, her voice fading. "I'm glad you thought so," he said, gently squeezing her hand. "Now I need you to keep talking to me, okay? Tell me where you're from, what you like to do. I want to know more about you." She gave a weak smile, but the effort to speak seemed evident. I'm from here. I like to read when I have time, but there's not always time, because I have a baby at home. But I love reading." Briccio leaned a little closer, trying to keep her awake. "What kind of books do you like to read, Karina? Romance, suspense, car? Tell me your favorite," he asked, almost in a pleading tone, desperate for the woman to stay awake. Karina took a deep breath, as if seeking strength in her own memories. "I like simple stories, something that makes me forget. Real life," she said, her eyelids growing heavy. The millionaire hurried to respond, keeping her alert. "I understand," he replied in an understanding tone. "Sometimes we all need a break from reality, and I promise that, as soon as we get to the hospital, you'll have all the time in the world to get distracted. You're going to be okay, all right?" Karina only nodded, her eyes almost closing again. Briccio, realizing her effort to stay conscious, moved even closer, his voice in an almost comforting tone. "You're strong, Karina. Just a little longer, the ambulance is on its way. Can you tell me more? Anything you want to share?" he implored again, almost crying when she sighed, her eyes blinking to keep them open. I just wanted to have more time," she answered with difficulty, leaving the millionaire even more apprehensive. "You'll have it, Karina," he assured, squeezing her hand again. "I'm here, and I'll help you get through this. I'm not going anywhere, okay? Just stay strong with me." At that moment, the distant sound of sirens finally filled the environment, and Briccio felt intense relief, but remained close to her, speaking softly until the paramedics took over her care. He followed everything closely, but his presence by her side was more than just a simple kindness. It was a silent promise that somehow he would be there for her. "I don't know why I'm doing this, but something about you is asking me not to abandon you now," he muttered, still undecided, as they placed her on the stretcher. As soon as they arrived at the hospital, Karina was immediately taken to the emergency room. Bricio waited in the hallway, anxiously watching the movement of the doctors and nurses rushing by. Time seemed to drag on, and he, accustomed to controlling everything around him, now felt powerless in the face of the situation. No matter how hard he tried to push away doubts and regain his rational businessman demeanor, something in his heart made him stay there, as if this moment had a meaning he didn't yet understand. "Why am I so anxious? I barely know her," he reflected, running his hand through his hair in a gesture of restlessness. The wait finally ended when a doctor approached him. Bricio, already impatient, rose immediately and followed the doctor to the room where Karina was lying, still unconscious. The doctor gave him a serious look and invited him to leave the room, asking for a moment to speak privately with Karina. Bricio hesitated but heeded the suggestion, moving away with slow steps, but with his gaze always attentive to Karina's frail figure on the bed. "I hope she's okay," he whispered to himself, watching her with an unexpected concern. Inside the room, the doctor approached Karina, who gradually opened her eyes, still disoriented. The expression on the doctor's face was somber, almost uncomfortable, as he carefully chose the words he was about to utter. He knew that this conversation would change everything for this woman, and for a moment he hesitated, but soon resumed his professional demeanor and approached a little closer. "Karina, I need you to remain calm to hear what I'm going to say," he began in a soft yet grave tone. Karina felt a tightness in her chest. Her heart seemed to beat stronger, and the uncertainty of what she would hear left her even weaker. She sought strength to sit up in bed, leaning on the soft, cold mattress. She stared at the doctor with slightly hazy eyes, trying to control the anxiety that invaded her being. He then took a deep breath before delivering the news that would surely be a difficult blow to bear. "Karina, I'm sorry, but after the tests we performed, we found that you have a critical condition. By our calculations, your time is very limited," he explained, his voice laden with weight. "You have at most 1 month to live." "1 month," murmured Karina, feeling the impact of those words like a cold blade piercing her chest. "But, and my baby? How will I raise my baby? Are you telling me that I won't see him grow up?" she asked with tears in her eyes. Karina felt the ground open up beneath her feet as the doctor remained there, serious, waiting for a response, perhaps some sign that she could understand the depth of the situation. Every word still echoed in her mind, and she struggled to accept the relentless fate that now surrounded her. Karina was motionless, her eyes brimming with tears and her breathing ragged, as she instinctively held her belly as if she could somehow protect the baby from the devastating news. 1 month? Only that? She repeated, almost as if confirmation could change what she had just heard. "I won't be here for her. I won't see her grow up," she mumbled. The doctor, with a sad expression, shook his head. "Unfortunately, we did everything we could, Karina. There's nothing more medicine can do at this point. The best thing now is to make the most of the time you have left," he said in a low tone. She tried to hold back her tears, but reality seemed like a sentence that tightened her chest with an overwhelming pain. She took a deep breath, trying to recompose herself before facing the inevitable. She knew she needed to say goodbye to everything she loved, but the feeling of helplessness was overwhelming. "Thank you. Thank you for being honest with me," she whispered, her voice almost fading. Upon leaving, Karina found Bricio waiting in the hallway, his face reflecting genuine concern. He immediately stood up, and her eyes sought his in search of silent support. She hesitated for a moment, but she knew there was nothing more to say. "Thank you, Bricio, for everything," she said, trying to muster a smile, even if without strength. "I really appreciate you being by my side. People like you are rare." Bricio felt the weight in her words, and something inside him wanted to insist that she let him accompany her home, but he respected the silence. "If you need anything at all, I live in the mansion next to the place I was handing out food. You can count on me if you need to," he replied, his voice low but firm, like a promise he would make sure to keep. Karina nodded and thanked him again, before heading home alone, feeling the weight of the world on her shoulders. Days passed since the hospital visit, But for Karina, every moment seemed like an eternity. She spent the last few days trying to absorb the devastating news and at the same time plan a farewell that tore her heart. Karina knew she had little time left, and her only concern now was to ensure that Sarah had a secure future, even if she herself could not be present. This thought tormented her, and every second by her daughter's side was a mixture of joy and profound pain. On a cold and silent night, Karina took Sarah in her arms and whispered in her ear, as if she wanted to forever engrave her voice in the baby's heart. "My little Sarah, you are everything to me, and even if one day you don't understand, I want you to know that this is the only way to save you." Her voice faltered, but she forced herself to continue, holding her daughter with infinite tenderness. "That's why I need to leave you with someone who can take care of you. Someone who can save you and give you the future that I cannot." With tears in her eyes, Karina hugged Sarah to her chest one last time and left a soft kiss on her forehead, feeling the delicate scent of a baby, a fragrance she knew she would never smell again. With a trembling voice, she whispered again, "Forgive Mommy, my love, one day. Maybe you'll understand." With a last look, Karina walked to the door of Bricio's mansion. The entrance was illuminated by the soft yellow light of the lamps, and the silence of the night seemed to be her only witness. She carefully placed Sarah by the door, leaving a letter beside the baby in which she had poured out her heart and all the love she felt. Her fingers were still trembling, but she knew she couldn't turn back. She stood up slowly, looking at the innocent face of her daughter, with a love that transcended understanding itself. "I love you, Sarah. Mom will always love you, no matter where I am," she whispered one last time before walking away. Karina walked a few meters away from the mansion, but the emotional and physical weight she carried became unbearable. Her steps began to falter, the world seemed to spin around her, and her vision became blurred. She managed to walk a few blocks after the entrance of the mansion until her body finally gave in, and she fainted on the cold and deserted sidewalk without strength to continue. Meanwhile, the fragile sound of Sarah's crying filled the silence of the night, echoing through the door of Bricio's mansion. The millionaire, already retiring to rest, heard the insistent sound and couldn't ignore his curiosity. With a mixture of strangeness and concern, he went to the entrance and opened the door, only to find the baby left alone there, curled up and crying. "But what's going on? Why is there a baby here?" he muttered, kneeling to pick up the child in his arms, trying to calm her down. He looked around, confused, but the street was empty and silent. Bricio entered the living room of his mansion with Sarah in his arms, his heart heavy and his mind filled with confusion. The baby's crying echoed through the wide and silent room, creating an almost palpable tension. He held her carefully, trying to soothe her with gentle movements, while his own thoughts became entangled in the unexpected situation. Sitting in an armchair, he noticed the crumpled envelope left with the girl in her basket. The letter seemed to have been written in a hurry, and he opened it without hesitation, his gaze fixed on the trembling and tear-stained words that gradually revealed what he never imagined finding at his door that night. "Please, take care of her. I beg you, do whatever you can to save my little Sarah. She has no one else but you now," he read in a low voice, his breath pausing for a moment, as if trying to absorb the weight of each word. The plea, so loaded with urgency and despair, echoed in his mind, leaving him confused and intrigued. But who is this woman? And why would she trust her daughter to me, a complete stranger? He muttered, his face taking on a serious and profound expression. Each line of the letter revealed a little more of the pain of that anonymous mother, a woman whose words overflowed with unconditional love. She didn't identify herself, but the urgency, the almost desperate tone made Bricio understand that this was her last option, an act of despair that now rested in his hands. Even without knowing her, he began to feel the weight of that responsibility growing within him, an inexplicable connection with the girl now nestled in his arms. "She's counting on me. Someone I don't even know is asking me to do everything I can for this girl," he reflected with growing unease. "I never asked to be in this position, but how can I ignore something like this?" Sarah, feeling the warmth of his arms, began to calm down, and he returned to reading the letter, immersing himself in the details that now became darker. "My daughter, like me, has a rare disease, something serious that could take her life in a few days. This is a desperate attempt for you to save her. Please, save my little Sarah." Bricio read, struck by the gravity of the situation with force. His heart tightened as he imagined how devastating it must have been for that mother to leave her there alone, in the hope that a stranger could save her. This is her last hope. "And now mine too," he whispered, trying to understand what it meant to be the only link of hope for such a fragile life. The mother's words unfolded like a silent scream of despair in his mind. "I hope you find a chance to save my daughter, however remote that chance may be, any possibility. I need you to fight for her, because I don't know how much longer I can fight." Bricio continued reading, each line seeming like a farewell full of love and sadness, and he felt compelled to respond to this plea, as if fate had chosen him for this unexpected mission. "How can I save you, Sarah?" "I don't even know where to start," he murmured, gently caressing the baby's head as his mind searched for a solution. The letter continued to reveal the anguish of a mother who knew she wouldn't live to see her daughter grow up, but who still wanted to ensure that Sarah had a chance. Bricio realized that the mother seemed to be saying goodbye not only to her daughter, but to the world, writing like someone who had already accepted her own death. That letter was a farewell, and he felt his chest tighten as he imagined the pain of that woman. "She trusted me to give you a chance. How can I refuse?" he murmured, looking into Sarah's tiny eyes, which gazed at him with an almost unbearable innocence. As he finished reading, the idea that this baby was only a few days old became increasingly difficult to bear. Bricio, a man accustomed to making cold and calculated decisions, felt adrift, dealing with a situation for which none of his resources and influence seemed sufficient. Still, he knew he had to act quickly, that every second counted to save that life. "I'll do everything it takes to save you," he promised, looking Sarah in the eyes with a determination that was growing inside him. The connection with Sarah seemed profound and inexplicable. Perhaps it was the fact that he had been chosen by her mother, a stranger who was now the only one who could offer her a chance. Or maybe it was fate, something he still didn't fully understand. He only knew he couldn't ignore that woman's plea, especially knowing that every second was precious for Sarah's survival. "I need to find help for you, and fast," he said, determined, as he formulated a plan in his mind. But the urgency of the moment made any clear reasoning difficult, and he felt the pressure mounting. It was then that Sarah began to breathe irregularly, and a chill of panic ran down his spine. He held her frail body closer to himself, trying to calm her down, but the baby's tiny lungs were contracting with difficulty, and her face began to lose color. The letter fell to the floor, forgotten, as Bricio focused all his attention on Sarah, the desperation evident in his eyes. "Sarah? Little one? Can you hear me?" he murmured desperately, his voice laden with a concern he had never experienced before. The tightness in his chest was almost painful, a mixture of fear and urgency. Time seemed to drag as he gently rocked the baby, trying to bring her back to a normal breathing rhythm. He knew he couldn't lose this battle, not after reading the words of that mother who trusted him blindly, placing her last hope in a complete stranger. "No, you're not going to give up now. I'm here, Sarah." "I'm here," he murmured, feeling the anguish grow with every second. But Sarah's weakness grew more pronounced, and Bricio felt the dread rise as he realized she had stopped breathing. The ensuing silence was deafening, filling the room like a crushing weight. He stood still holding the tiny body in his arms, unable to accept what was happening. Sarah's eyes, once filled with a delicate innocence, were now closed, and the absence of her breathing became a suffocating void. "Please, Sarah." "Don't leave me now," he whispered, the despair in his voice breaking the composure that had always characterized him. He pulled Sarah closer to his chest, embracing her with an intensity that seemed almost like a prayer, as if the warmth of his body could reignite life in that little girl. Tears began to well up, silent and unexpected, streaming down the face of a man who rarely showed any sign of fragility. Bricio, the man accustomed to absolute control, power, and wealth, now found himself reduced to helplessness, confronted by the fragility of life in his arms. The feeling of powerlessness consumed him, and he, in a last desperate act, brought his face close to Sarah's tiny body, feeling his heart tighten more and more. He rocked her gently, still whispering her name as if his voice could elicit a response. "I promise to take care of you. I won't fail, he repeated, even though he knew it might be too late. Time seemed suspended as Briccio held Sarah's small, fragile body. The silence of the room transformed into an overwhelming void. He refused to accept the worst, even as the girl's breathing had ceased, and her body seemed to yield to the inevitable. In an act of pure desperation, he brought his lips to her forehead and murmured words he did not fully understand, a silent plea, a promise for which he was not yet prepared. With steady hands, he began to apply gentle compression to her chest, alternating with careful breaths, determined not to give up. "Sarah, I won't let you go. Not now. Please listen to me," he whispered, his voice choked as he continued the effort, as if his own will could restore the flicker of life that was ebbing from her. And then, almost like a miracle, Sarah's tiny body gave a slight spasm. Her breathing returned, weak and unsteady, but it was there, and her eyes opened for a moment, still hazy and confused. Briccio felt relief coursing through his body, but he couldn't relax. He knew every second was precious. Without wasting time, he covered her with a blanket, holding her carefully, and ran towards the door, his heart still racing, but now driven by a clear decision. "I'm going to take you to the hospital, Sarah. We'll find a way," he stated with conviction, as he held the baby close to himself, feeling the fragile warmth of her breathing. Upon arriving at the hospital, Briccio was quickly attended to, the doctors and nurses noting the urgency in his gaze and the tenderness with which he held the girl. Sarah was immediately taken to the emergency room, and Briccio accompanied her. The environment around him seemed a blur of lights and rushed voices, but he kept his focus on one thing. He wouldn't leave Sarah alone, no matter what any diagnosis said. "Please, do what you can. She needs to survive," he said, his voice laden with an authority that brooked no objection as he looked at the attending physician. The following hours were a blur of examinations and discussions among the doctors. Briccio stood waiting, observing every movement, every reaction, trying to catch any sign of hope in the expressions of the professionals around him. Finally, one of the doctors approached, and Briccio immediately knew that the news would not be good. The doctor hesitated for a moment before speaking, his face reflecting the weight of a difficult truth to share. "Mr. Briccio, we have done everything within our power, but Sarah's condition is extremely rare and advanced," the doctor began, keeping a cautious tone of voice. "Unfortunately, there is no available treatment that can save her." Briccio felt the tension rise in his chest, but kept his expression firm, not shifting his gaze. "So, what does that mean? Will she continue suffering? Is there anything I can do?" he asked, his voice cold, but with anguish disguised beneath the surface. The doctor took a deep breath before answering. "I understand your concern, sir. We have administered medication to keep her comfortable, but it's only a matter of time. The recommendation is that you take her home, where she can spend her final moments with peace and dignity. Unfortunately, Sarah has only a few days left to live." Those words struck Briccio with the force of an avalanche, but he refused to be crushed. He looked at the doctor, a glint of defiance in his eyes, and firmly grasped the professional's arm. "Take her home and wait for her to die? That's the solution you're offering me?" The question echoed down the hallway, his voice laden with an indignation he made no effort to hide. "I understand that it's difficult to accept, sir, but her situation is irreversible. We don't want her to suffer more than necessary," the doctor responded, trying to remain calm in the face of Briccio's resistance. But Briccio couldn't accept those words. The image of Sarah, so frail, so helpless, came back to his mind. He remembered the letter, his mother's words asking him to save her daughter. He couldn't simply give up, not after everything he had gone through to bring her here. He felt despair transforming into an unshakable force of will. "You don't know Sarah, and you don't know my determination. I won't accept a fate without fighting," he stated, his voice firm, almost defiant. The doctor hesitated, observing him with a mixture of respect and skepticism. "Mr. Briccio, I understand your desire to find a solution, but it's important to accept reality. Sarah will not survive. All we can do is ensure that she feels minimal pain." Briccio released the doctor's arm and took a step back, observing the scene around him. He felt an irrational urge to fight against the impossible, to move the world if necessary. The helplessness made him feel like he was in a lost battle, But he knew this was not the time to give up. A silent determination took over every fiber of his being. I do not accept this sentence. There is a treatment somewhere, some specialist, some study that can give her a chance. I will pay whatever it takes, he said, his voice low but filled with a fierce intensity. The other doctors, overhearing the conversation, exchanged glances, as if trying to decide how to deal with that reaction. They saw the pain and determination in Bricio's eyes, but they were accustomed to the cold reality of incurable diseases. To them, Sarah was just another sad case, a victim of an incurable condition, something they should accept without question. We understand your position, but you need to consider that. Sometimes acceptance is the best choice, said the doctor in a resigned tone, trying to calm Bricio down. But Bricio refused to accept. He looked at Sarah's sleeping face, her tiny eyes closed, her breathing weak. He felt a promise growing inside him, something that transcended logic and understanding. Her mother trusted him, handed the girl over to him because she believed in something he still did not understand, but that now pulsed within him as an obligation. She will fight. And I will fight with her, he whispered, determined, as he leaned over to caress the baby's forehead, who seemed to be sleeping deeply. The doctor sighed, giving him one last look, filled with sympathy and resignation. Mr. Bricio, do what you think is necessary, but be prepared for the worst. Sarah doesn't have much time. Those words hung in the air, but Bricio remained motionless, absorbing every syllable as an affront to the silent promise he had made. He knew the odds were minimal, knew he was defying logic itself, but he would not let that reality paralyze him. Prepare everything. I'll take Sarah home, but I will find someone who can help her, he said, turning to the doctors with a determination that bordered on the impossible. With Sarah asleep in his arms, he left the hospital without looking back, his mind already focused on the next step. Some time later, Bricio entered the mansion silently, the weight of the night still settling on his shoulders. He looked at Sarah asleep in his arms, her serene face despite the fragility that marked every feature. With firm steps, he headed to one of the rooms in the house, determined to turn it into a safe space where he could improvise the care she needed. With every move, fear and hope mingled, creating an almost unbearable tension. Upon arriving in the room, he carefully laid Sarah on the bed, covering her with a soft blanket as he watched her delicate face. You'll be fine, Sarah, he murmured, his voice low but filled with determination. I won't let anything happen to you. He pulled a chair close to the bed, watching her with a restless mind already searching for alternatives. A plan, something that could give her a chance to save her. Every second counted, and he knew he could not rest until he found a solution. The first idea that came to his mind was to contact specialists, those who had already dealt with rare diseases and critical cases like hers. He grabbed his cell phone and began dialing the numbers of contacts he had gathered over the years. But to his frustration, most professionals were out of the country or unavailable at that moment. I need someone now. I can't wait, he muttered, his voice broken by despair. She needs help immediately. With every call he made, the answer was the same. Sorry, Mr. Bricio, but we can't assist you immediately. And the feeling of helplessness kept growing, like a shadow surrounding him. He forced himself not to give in to panic and continued to call, alternating between numbers of hospitals, clinics, and international specialists. The early morning hours advanced, and he remained motionless by the bedside, watching Sarah's irregular breathing while searching for a way out, any possibility. I won't give up, Sarah. Someone will help us, he promised, looking at her sleeping face as if the words could guarantee her survival. As the hours passed, fatigue began to weigh on him, but his determination kept him steady. He could not afford to stop, not now. He opened his laptop on the nearby table and began searching for research, studies, anything that could offer hope. He discovered articles on experimental treatments and alternative therapies, but they all seemed distant or unfeasible in the short term. He felt increasingly suffocated by the pressure, but he did not allow discouragement to overcome him. There is a solution. There has to be, he murmured, his gaze fixed on the screen as the computer's glow reflected his tired and anguished expression. The night continued, and Bricio alternated between the computer screen and the phone, tirelessly trying to contact clinics and specialists around the world. The number of denials and evasive answers only increased his frustration, but he did not let himself be discouraged. Sarah's innocent and vulnerable face was what kept him firm, what prevented him from stopping. He approached her again, touching her tiny hand so small and fragile that it seemed like a breath of life. "I'm here, little one. I won't leave you alone. I promised your mother that," he whispered, as the weight of that promise became even more intense. The time seemed like a sharpened knife, cutting each moment he spent without an answer. Bricio knew that dawn was approaching, and that he had not slept for a single moment. But that possibility did not even cross his mind. He observed every movement Sarah made, attentive to any sign of improvement or worsening, his heart tightening with each of her hesitant breaths. The promise he had made to himself not to let her suffer seemed unbreakable, but the fear of failing began to insinuate itself into his mind. "I won't let you go, little one. We'll fight together," he said in a low voice, trying to maintain his strength in the face of uncertainty. As the morning began to dawn in the sky, Bricio realized that Sarah's breathing was becoming increasingly irregular. He moved closer, observing her closely, and felt a tightness in his chest as he realized she seemed even weaker. His instinct made him hold her small hand, as if that gesture could infuse her with some strength, some spirit to resist. "Sarah, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Just fight. A little longer," he whispered, trying to control his trembling voice, feeling the helplessness grow. Suddenly, Sarah's body began to shake, and he realized something terrible was happening. Her small arms and legs were contracting uncontrollably, and her delicate face took on an expression of pain. A seizure had begun, and despair took hold of Bricio, who tried to hold her gently, trying to prevent her from getting hurt. "No, Sarah. Not now," he murmured, his heart racing as he watched the small life before him wage an invisible battle. The scene was devastating, and he knew he could do nothing but wait for the seizure to pass, but every second seemed like an eternity. Tears welled up in his eyes, and he found himself confronted with his worst fears. Each of her uncontrolled movements made him feel more vulnerable, helpless in the face of the situation. "Sarah, I'm here. I'll protect you. Please, just hold on," he pleaded, feeling the terror growing within him. The seizure ceased as suddenly as it had started, leaving Sarah's body inert, her breathing even weaker. Bricio held her in his arms, his heart pounding as he tried to catch his breath. He felt the weight of what was happening, the relentless struggle between life and death, and knew he could not waste time. "I swore I wouldn't leave you. And I'll keep that promise, Sarah," he whispered, as he formulated new plans in his mind, determined to find a way, any way at all. Sarah's seizure finally subsided, leaving her small body exhausted and even more fragile. Bricio remained by her side, trying to stabilize his own breathing, as relief and fear consumed him at the same time. The silence that followed seemed overwhelming, but he refused to succumb to panic. He was determined to give Sarah what she needed, to keep her comfortable and safe no matter what lay ahead. "You made it through that, little one. You're stronger than you realize," he murmured, gently caressing her face, feeling a little more confident having her by his side, still breathing. With his stomach tight with tension, Bricio realized Sarah needed to eat to regain her strength. He looked around, trying to remember the steps he had seen in brief moments when visiting friends with young children, but he had never done it alone. He walked into the mansion's kitchen and began searching for what he needed. He rummaged through the shelves and the refrigerator, where a staff member, concerned for the baby, had left some basic infant feeding items. "A bottle. How does this work?" he muttered, picking up the milk container and trying to read the instructions, fatigue clouding his vision, but his focus remaining steady. He carefully followed the instructions, measuring the amounts of water and powdered milk, heating it to the ideal temperature, testing it on his own wrist. He felt strangely vulnerable doing something so common, yet so vital. Every detail was a testament to his determination, and he knew he needed to dedicate himself with the same precision and caution he applied in business. "This is how we take care of someone, Sarah," he whispered, as if speaking to himself as the smell of the heated milk began to fill the kitchen. Bricio returned to the room, holding the baby bottle carefully, and approached the bed, where Sarah remained quiet, still with a pale face, but her eyes watched him with silent curiosity. Sitting beside her, He positioned the bottle and gently helped her hold the flask. Her first hesitant gulp brought him a small sigh of relief. He knew that feeding would give her strength and keep her stable at least for some time. "Come on, little one. This will give you energy. I'm here with you," he whispered, watching her drink the bottle slowly, as if that simple act were a silent victory. As Sarah fed, he could notice her gaze softening, her eyes following his in an expression that seemed to understand the safety and care he conveyed to her. The feeling this caused in Briccio was new and unknown, a tenderness he didn't know he was capable of feeling. He watched her attentively, and with each sip, his breathing also stabilized, the tension of hours dissipating little by little. "That's it, little one. You're strong and I'm here with you," he repeated, as if those words could protect them both from the lurking dangers. As she finished the bottle, Sarah looked at him with a special sparkle in her eyes, and for the first time, a small smile formed on her lips, a brief expression, but one that lit up her face with a sweetness Briccio would never forget. He stood still, surprised by the shy smile, feeling a strange warmth fill his chest. The little girl was there, vulnerable, but she was offering him a sign of trust and gratitude with that gesture. You smiled at me, Sarah," he murmured with a smile back, almost in disbelief as a warmth took over his chest. "I guess that means we're in this together, doesn't it?" Briccio picked Sarah up in his arms, rocking her gently and allowing himself to relax for a moment, letting himself be enveloped by her innocence and trust. That connection, however unexpected, gave him strength to continue, to believe that he could protect her and give her a chance. He ran his fingers over her face, as if that touch could communicate everything he didn't know how to express in words. "I won't give up on you, Sarah. That smile is the reason we'll keep fighting," he whispered, his voice loaded with an unbreakable promise. Night fell again, and Briccio put her back in the makeshift crib, covered with blankets to protect her from the cold. He knew he wouldn't be able to sleep, but he needed to stay alert, prepared for any eventuality. He settled beside the crib, phone in hand, sending emails and messages to doctors and specialists, hoping for a response, a solution that could arrive before her time ran out. "I need more help, someone who can figure out how to save this girl," he murmured, his fingers pressing the screen, his eyes attentive and his mind focused. As the early morning hours advanced, the room became a silent refuge, a space where time seemed suspended, devoted exclusively to that little life. He watched each of Sarah's breaths, every movement of hers, not allowing fatigue to overcome him. Her presence was what kept him awake, and he knew that every second counted. "I'm here, Sarah. I'll be here every moment," he whispered, feeling exhaustion taking over but remaining steadfast. The environment began to cool as the hours passed, and he noticed that Sarah's breathing was becoming more and more difficult. He came closer to her, touching her forehead, and felt an abnormal heat on her skin. The fever was high, and he knew that was a warning sign. His heart raced and he held her, trying to calm her and at the same time thinking about what he could do to reduce her temperature. "Sarah, you have a fever," he murmured with a worried face, feeling the urgency taking over again. Immediately he grabbed a clean cloth, wetting it with cold water and gently wiping her forehead and body. He knew he needed to act quickly, and every second seemed to slip away. He watched her face, which now looked even more fragile, and a growing fear invaded his chest. He felt time running against them, and the high fever made the situation even more alarming. "You're going to overcome this. I believe in you," he said, even with a trembling voice, as if trying to convince her and himself. Briccio alternated between placing cold compresses and watching her face, trying anything to relieve the fever. The tension was overwhelming, and he found himself once again confronted by helplessness. The smile she had offered him earlier now seemed distant, and he feared the situation could worsen at any moment. Briccio began to pace back and forth, trying to stay calm while Sarah rested in his arms. Her fever persisted, her frail body was too hot, and Briccio's worry increased with every second. He alternated between checking on her and putting on new compresses while trying to keep the little one stable. Suddenly, Sarah began to squirm in his arms, and he felt his heart racing. Her fragile, delicate body stiffened, and her arms and legs began to move erratically. "No, Sarah. Hold on. I'm here, it will pass," he murmured, holding her gently and trying to keep his voice calm, but the despair was evident in his eyes. The convulsion took over Sarah's small body, each spasm a stab of despair in Bricio. He held her firmly, trying to prevent her from getting hurt, but fear paralyzed him from within. Her face contorted in pain, and her glassy eyes made his heart ache in a way he had never felt before. Tears welled up in his eyes as he whispered words of comfort, even though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Sarah, I need you to stay strong. You need to overcome this," he repeated, his lips trembling as if those words could dispel the gravity of the situation. The convulsion finally ceased, but only for a brief moment. Bricio took a deep breath, trying to recompose himself, but before he could even process the momentary relief, Sarah's body began to contort again. The spasms came with even greater force, and he felt as if the world was crumbling around him. The intensity of the convulsion seemed to take over every part of her, and he found himself helpless, holding her gently, but not knowing how to alleviate the pain she was feeling. "You're going to be okay, Sarah. I promise I'll protect you," he said, although he felt the anguish growing inside him, unable to keep that promise at that moment. The situation seemed to worsen with every second, and he realized he was facing something beyond his comprehension. He tried to remember the doctors, the instructions, but nothing seemed enough to stop that sequence of convulsions. Her body temperature remained high, and with each involuntary movement, he feared what might come next. The little girl was fighting a battle that Bricio didn't know how to win, and the feeling of helplessness consumed him. "Please, Sarah, fight. I'm here and you're not alone," he said, gently squeezing her, trying to keep her as comfortable as possible. The force of the convulsions increased and then weakened, but they didn't completely cease, like a wave that receded only to return with even greater intensity. Bricio felt panic gripping his chest as he realized there was nothing he could do but hold little Sarah in his arms, feeling each spasm as if it were his own body suffering. The room seemed filled with an almost suffocating tension, and Sarah's face grew even paler, a sight he couldn't bear. "You need to resist, Sarah. I'm here. Please stay with me," he murmured, more to himself than to her, trying to stay calm. He adjusted her body in his arms, wiping the sweat that was starting to run down her face, and felt a growing despair as he saw that the convulsions continued. Her face was starting to lose color, and the spasms were stronger, as if her body was in its last attempt at resistance. Bricio couldn't accept that, not after promising to protect her. He knew he needed help, but he was alone in that room facing something that defied all logic and reason. "I've never felt so helpless, Sarah, but I'll keep trying for you," he whispered, his voice broken by fear and uncertainty. Sarah's small body shuddered again, and Bricio felt as if her pain was piercing through him. He held her more carefully, but his own movements were trembling, reflecting the chaos that was going through his mind and heart. Everything around seemed to darken, and he realized he was on the verge of his limit, but his promise kept him steady. He needed to fight. He needed to find a way out for Sarah. "I'm your only chance, and you're my reason to keep going," he murmured, trying to find strength where it seemed there was none left. Finally, Sarah's spasms began to subside, and her body yielded into an eerie silence. She was lifeless in his arms, her face pale, and her breathing was so faint that he could barely feel it. Bricio panicked, his fingers trembling as he touched her face, trying to find any sign of life. The absence of movement made him feel an overwhelming void, as if the ground had collapsed beneath his feet. "Sarah, don't leave me, please," he pleaded, his voice weak and full of emotion, as he held her lifeless little body against his chest. He watched her for a few more moments, his mind divided between fear and hope, a constant battle between acceptance and refusal that she might be passing. Every second was a torment, and he couldn't pull away, his face close to hers, as if somehow trying to protect her from the worst. With his heart racing and despair taking over, Bricio grabbed his phone and called the emergency pediatrician. He explained, his voice trembling and muffled by anguish, what had just happened with Sarah while looking at her small body, still so fragile in his arms. The pediatrician listened attentively, and the response, though reassuring in terms of instructions, did not offer the hope he expected. Each word from the doctor was a reminder of the severity of Sarah's condition, and that, with the advanced state of her illness, all they could do was mitigate her suffering. "Doctor, what can I do if this happens again?" I need something that will really work to help her, Bricio pleaded, gripping the phone tightly. The tension in his voice was almost palpable, a mix of supplication and determination that he rarely expressed. The pediatrician took a deep breath on the other end of the line and responded in a heavy voice, as if trying to carefully measure his words. Mr. Bricio, what you can do is follow the instructions I'm going to give you. But know that these seizures are part of her condition. Just try to stay calm, put her in a safe place, and apply cold compresses to lower her temperature and give her the antipyretic I prescribed. Bricio nodded, absorbing the instructions, but the void inside him grew. He knew the doctor's words were an attempt to alleviate his panic, but he also felt that the answers given were not enough. He wanted something more, a definitive solution, but he was stuck with the advice that he could only act to alleviate the symptoms. After hanging up, he looked at Sarah, feeling the weight of the situation and the growing responsibility he carried in his arms. I didn't want it to be like this, Sarah. I wanted to be able to do much more for you, he whispered, as the fear of failure took hold of every fiber of his being. Trying to absorb the gravity of the conversation with the doctor, Bricio gave Sarah the medicine and took her to the mansion's garden, seeking fresh air so they could both breathe better. The garden was a quiet and peaceful space, filled with trees and carefully cultivated flowers, and he believed that the calm of that environment could provide some comfort for her. With Sarah nestled in his arms, he walked slowly among the trees, feeling the weight of the night and the gentle chill of the dew, hoping that contact with nature would bring some peace to them both. Sarah, I wish you could feel this peace, he murmured, caressing her still warm face. There's so much for you to experience in the world. I just wish you had that chance. The hope in his voice sounded like a silent lament, a longing for something that seemed to slip through his fingers. As he walked through the garden, Bricio felt the need to talk more with her, to share something that would bring her some hope, even if she was unable to understand. He knew the chances were slim, but he wouldn't give up on keeping her alive. He sat down on a wooden bench, holding her gently, and began to speak in a low voice, almost as if he were telling her a secret. You know, little one, I never thought I'd find someone who would change my life so much. And yet here you are, he said, with a lightness that contrasted with the tightness in his chest. I think it was fate that brought you to me, and no matter how difficult everything seems, I promise I'll be the family you need. His voice came out in a whispered promise, laden with a hope he desperately wanted to make real. Sarah remained asleep, but he continued to speak, as if his words could bring her relief, a sense of belonging. There was something profoundly comforting in expressing those promises, in sharing a desire that he might never be able to fulfill, but that filled him with strength. The simple act of talking to her transformed his fear into a solid conviction, something he wanted to carry forward, regardless of the difficulties. You'll never be alone, Sarah. I'll do everything to make sure you have a home, someone who loves and takes care of you, he whispered, as the soft glow of the moonlight illuminated his face and Sarah's like a silent promise. He knew that even without knowing how, he would do everything to keep her safe and loved. The cold night wind began to intensify, and he adjusted the blanket covering Sarah, trying to protect her from the cold. He looked at the starry sky and reflected on how life could be uncertain, full of unexpected twists and turns, and yet that moment seemed to have a purpose. He wanted Sarah to know somehow that there was someone who cared, someone who would do the impossible so that she could live. You're a fighter, little one. I can see it just by looking at you, he said, smiling at her sleeping face. And I promise I'll fight by your side until the very last moment. I don't have a family, just you, and I'll fight with everything I have so we can get through this together. The glow of the stars illuminated Sarah's face, and Bricio felt overwhelmed by the strength of that promise, a strength he had never felt before. It was then that he noticed something that made him stop. Sarah began to change color, and a purplish hue spread across her delicate skin. Bricio's heart immediately raced, and he felt a wave of panic rise up to his throat. Her breathing was weak, almost non-existent, and he realized something terrible was happening. Her face, once rosy, now displayed a cold and somber hue, a sign he feared with all his might. No, Sarah. Please, not now, he whispered, his voice laden with despair. The intensity of the moment made him feel small in the face of the immensity of the problem they were facing. Bricio held Sarah's frail body, her skin turning a deep purple shade, and her breathing so light he could barely feel it. The sense of despair was almost paralyzing, but he knew he couldn't waste time. Without hesitation, he rose from the garden bench and ran to the car, carefully arranging Sarah in the back seat. Adrenaline took over every movement, and he knew every second was crucial. With an urgency that made him nearly lose control of his own body, he accelerated the car, driving towards the hospital. "You're going to be okay, Sarah. I promise. Just hold on a little longer," he murmured, his gaze fixed on the road and his heart pounding, trying not to think about what could happen if they didn't make it in time. The cold night seemed to reflect Bricio's despair. With each glance in the rearview mirror, the image of Sarah growing paler and frailer pushed him to accelerate even more. The tension rose with every turn, every traffic light, and he couldn't avoid the worst scenarios running through his mind. In the midst of this race against time, his phone rang, and he answered on speakerphone with a mixture of hope and fear, still not slowing down. "Mr. Bricio?" The voice on the other end was firm and decisive, bringing a glimmer of relief to his heart. "This is Dr. Henry. I received your message about Sarah, and I believe I can help. There's an experimental treatment that could save her life." Bricio felt hope ignite again, a spark of light amidst the despair. "You really can. She's very weak. I need something immediate," he replied, trying to stay calm, but his voice trembled with simultaneous anxiety and relief. The doctor continued, his voice cautious but direct. "It's an experimental treatment still in the trial phase. It could bring severe risks, and we have no guarantees she'll survive the procedure. It's a one-time chance, but her condition makes everything even more delicate." Bricio gripped the steering wheel, the decision weighing on his mind. He knew the risk was immense, but he felt he couldn't waste the slightest possibility. "I'm willing to take the risk. I can't let her go without at least trying," he stated, his voice determined as if he was already prepared to face any consequence. Dr. Henry instructed him to go to the hospital, where he was prepared to receive them. As he drove, Bricio looked at Sarah through the rearview mirror, trying to calm her, despite his racing heart and overwhelming fear. He knew that moment could define everything, and even with the risks, it was a chance he wouldn't let slip away. "Hold on, little one. We're almost there and they'll help you," he said, trying to convey confidence even when uncertainty was crushing. Upon arriving at the hospital, a medical team awaited at the entrance, ready to start the procedure as soon as Bricio exited the car with Sarah in his arms. He handed her over to the doctors reluctantly, but knew it was necessary. Dr. Henry approached, his face grave and his gaze steady, and Bricio noticed the doctor understood the weight of that situation. "We'll do everything possible and impossible, Mr. Bricio," the doctor said, signaling the team to begin preparations. "But you need to be aware that this is a risky path. The side effects could be severe, and her body may not withstand it." Bricio took a deep breath, facing the doctor with a serious expression. "It's her only chance, doctor, and I trust the strength this little one has. Do whatever it takes," he responded, trying not to let his despair show. The doctor nodded in approval and headed to the treatment room where preparations were being made swiftly and precisely. Bricio waited in the waiting room, time passing too slowly, each second a torment. He paced back and forth, his mind flooded with thoughts. He tried to cling to hope, but the fear of losing Sarah was almost unbearable. "You're going to make it, Sarah. I won't let anything take you away from me," he murmured to himself, feeling the promise he had made to Sarah's mother weighing heavier and heavier. When the doctors finally began the procedure, Bricio felt the air trapped in his lungs, as if each of their movements was connected to Sarah's own life. The room was in absolute silence, and he observed every step, every exchange of glances between the professionals, trying to read something that could indicate her state. But suddenly he noticed a worrying movement among the doctors, the tense looks and the urgent communication between them. "No, not now, Sarah," he whispered, realizing that something was not going as planned. Dr. Henry approached Bricio, his expression somber and concerned. "Mr. Bricio, Sarah's condition has worsened. We need to interrupt the treatment to stabilize her before we can continue. She is very weak and not responding as we expected, and—" "They may not make it," he said, making Bricio feel the ground disappearing from under his feet. The possibility that this could be the end took over his mind. He looked at the doctor, his eyes full of pleading and despair. Please, doctor, do something. Don't let her go now, he begged, his voice filled with anguish and fear. The doctor nodded, visibly sympathetic, but his expression remained tense. We are doing everything we can, but at this moment, her body is in a critical state. We need to try to stabilize her before attempting anything else. There are no guarantees. Bricio watched as the medical team mobilized to stabilize Sarah, his heart tight in a mix of despair and helplessness. The fight for Sarah's life was far from over, and he knew that this was one of the most critical moments. Every second seemed an eternity as he waited, fearing what could happen. Sarah, you have to be strong. You have to hold on, he murmured, his eyes fixed on Sarah's small figure as he struggled to keep hope alive. Hours later, the medical team maintained an intense concentration as they initiated the experimental treatment on Sarah. Every movement was calculated, every adjustment made with precision not to overload the baby's fragile body. The hospital room was lit by soft lights, but the tension was palpable. Bricio watched everything in silence, his heart racing and his hands trembling, feeling helpless but determined to give all possible support so that Sarah could hold on. You're going to get through this, Sarah. I'm here and I'm not going anywhere, he murmured, trying to disguise the fear in his voice as if he wanted her to feel the security of his presence. Dr. Henry, who had coordinated the start of the treatment, constantly looked at the monitors, attentive to any change in the baby's vital signs. Sarah's body's reactions to the treatment were unpredictable. Small spasms ran through her body, and her breathing sometimes seemed irregular, which made the doctors exchange worried glances. Bricio felt each of these reactions like a stab in his chest, his gaze fixed on her small figure, wishing he could trade places with her. Please, little one. Be strong, he whispered, almost as if he could convince her to fight a little longer. As the treatment progressed, the machines around Sarah's bed monitored every heartbeat, every fluctuation in her breathing, and Bricio watched the lines on the screen rise and fall, oscillating in a way he did not fully understand, but which reflected the battle being waged within her. With every second, he felt he was on a roller coaster of hope and fear, trying to maintain control over his growing anguish. We got you a treatment, Sarah. The impossible happened. Now you have to keep fighting, he murmured, as he watched her expression soften for brief moments. Dr. Henry adjusted one of the dosages and approached Bricio to explain the next steps. Mr. Bricio, we are monitoring every reaction with the utmost care. The treatment is intense, and for someone in Sarah's condition, every adjustment is a new battle. We are doing everything possible, the doctor said, his voice firm but with a trace of concern. Bricio nodded, his expression determined. I believe everything will be all right, doctor. This girl will survive and hold on. She has to hold on, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady as he looked at Sarah again, feeling a wave of hope, however small. The minutes passed, and the tension only increased. Sarah seemed more and more fragile, but still maintained a shallow breath, her chest rising and falling irregularly. Bricio remained by her side, observing every detail, as if he wanted to transmit his strength through his mere presence. At times he touched Sarah's small hand, as if the contact could maintain a connection between them, something to hold her to life. Sarah, you're making it. We're going to get through this together, he whispered, his voice choked, the weight of the firm promise in his heart. Suddenly, an alarm on the monitors sounded, interrupting the moment of calm. The doctors became agitated, and Bricio felt his heart stop as he saw Sarah's vital signs beginning to oscillate alarmingly. Dr. Henry frowned as the other doctors quickly adjusted the equipment, trying to stabilize the situation. Bricio took a step back, the terror evident on his face, but without losing focus on the struggle unfolding before his eyes. Please, Sarah, keep going. Please don't go now, he murmured, trying to hold back tears, but feeling his voice choke. Dr. Henry gave instructions to decrease the dosage and stabilize Sarah's heart rate, the tension in the room increasing even more. Bricio watched as the doctors tried to circumvent the crisis, their faces reflecting the gravity of what was happening. He knew he was witnessing a delicate struggle, where any mistake could cost the little girl's life, but he clung to the hope that every effort would make a difference. She's going to make it through this, doctor. She has to make it through, Bricio said, almost as if he were speaking to himself, a way to hold on to the hope that was beginning to slip away. The spasms in Sarah's body subsided for a moment, and the doctors took the opportunity to adjust the machines and administer another dose of medication with extreme care. Every second was a battle against time, and Bricio felt paralyzed, but at the same time completely connected to that moment, to Sarah's struggle to survive. Every heartbeat of hers was a victory, however small, and he clung to it like an anchor. The battle for Sarah's life was becoming increasingly difficult. Her vital signs were constantly fluctuating, and Bricio watched the monitors with an almost suffocating anxiety, as if her fate depended on every line on that screen. He knew her life was hanging by a thread, but he refused to yield to the idea that he could lose her. "You're going to beat this, Sarah. I know you will," he murmured, his eyes fixed on her, as if his strength could reach her. Suddenly the monitors emitted a new alarm, and Sarah's vital signs began to fail, the lines on the screen becoming erratic. The medical team exchanged urgent glances, and Dr. Henry turned to Bricio, his expression somber. "Mr. Bricio, we need to pause the treatment. Her body is reacting negatively and we need to stabilize her again." Bricio felt the ground disappear from under his feet, and his face turned pale as he realized that Sarah was on the verge of something very serious. He looked at Dr. Henry with pleading eyes, unable to accept what was happening. "Doctor, don't let her go, please, I beg you," he said, his voice full of anguish and despair. Dr. Henry nodded, but his face reflected the gravity of the situation. He turned to the doctors, who began the procedures to stabilize Sarah, every movement charged with urgency. The room was in a silence broken only by the sound of the monitors and the murmurs of the doctors, and Bricio watched, unable to look away, as Sarah's fate seemed to hang on the thin line between life and death. At the hospital, Bricio felt torn between hope and despair. Dr. Henry had asked him to wait outside the room while the medical team fought to stabilize Sarah, but the wait seemed suffocating, each second dragging like a weight. Feeling the need for some refuge, he made his way to the small chapel inside the hospital, a simple and quiet space that, on that night, seemed the only place where he could recompose himself. As he entered the chapel, Bricio observed the environment with a mixture of discomfort and need. The walls, illuminated by the soft glow of candles, conveyed a serenity that contrasted with the storm he felt inside. Slowly, he walked up to the altar and knelt down, something he hadn't done in years. Hesitantly, he clasped his hands and began to search for words, but found that his voice was stuck in his chest. "I don't know. I don't even know if I'm doing this right," he murmured, his voice low and trembling, as if he were trying to get used to the sound of his own words. "I've never been one to ask for anything, let alone to someone I don't even know if they can hear me, but I'm not asking for myself," he murmured. He took a deep breath, trying to reorganize his thoughts. The plea he wanted to make was confusing, and fear made him struggle against every word. But he knew he needed to express himself, to open his heart for the first time in such an intense and sincere way. He felt that the moment demanded something greater than him, and he surrendered to that need with an emotional weight he had never experienced. "I don't want this to be about me or about what I've been through. I just want to ask for her life," he continued. His voice choked as he fixed his gaze on the flickering flame of a candle near the altar. "She's so small, so innocent. She's barely had time to discover what life is. I know I have no right to ask. But if someone can help, please, hear me." The tears began to silently roll down Bricio's face, and he paused, taking a deep breath, struggling to maintain his composure. The vulnerability of that moment surprised him, but also comforted him in a strange way, as if he was finally allowing himself to feel and express everything he had long repressed. "I never thought I would love someone like this. I've always been a serious, closed-off man, but when I look at her, all I want is to protect her, to give her everything I could never have. A family," he confessed, his gaze fixed on the altar, as if each word stripped him of all his masks. "It's as if I've been given a chance to be someone better, to do something right for the first time, but how can I do that if her life is slipping through my hands?" He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of each word, and continued to murmur, almost as if speaking to himself. But he knew this moment was more than an internal conversation. It was a complete surrender, a plea to the unknown, something he never thought he would do. I would give anything, absolutely anything, to see her well. Take everything I have, but let her stay. If I could, I would trade places with her, just so she would have a chance. Please, if there is any justice in this world, don't take away her opportunity to live," he whispered, his clasped hands tightening more and more. Briccio paused, his eyes fixed on the altar, as if waiting for an answer, some sign that his prayer had been heard. The silence in the chapel was absolute, and he could hear his own heart beating, each beat laden with expectation and fear. And in that silence, he realized how much he cared, how much he had changed since Sarah came into his life. She is the only thing that matters now. There is no wealth, power, or status that can replace her presence. "It's as if she awoke something I thought was dead inside me," he confessed, feeling his voice fail again. "So if there is any way to save this small and innocent life, if there is any chance, I beg you, don't let her go." He felt the weight of his words echoing within him, each sentence seeming to tear a piece of his soul away. He was no longer the confident and impenetrable man. At that moment, he was someone who had stripped himself of all barriers, someone who recognized his own fragility and dependence. He knew it was all out of his control, and that all he could do was wait and believe. "If this is a test, if this is my only chance at redemption, then give me the strength to overcome. Help me be the man she deserves me to be," he continued, the words coming out like a silent promise. "I'm not perfect, but I want to be someone she can call family. Please, just let her live." Briccio closed his eyes, his mind flooded with images of Sarah. The small moments they had shared, his promise to her mother, everything he wanted to offer her. He didn't know how long he had been praying, but at that moment all that mattered was the hope that somehow his prayer could reach someone, something that could change destiny. "I'm not good at praying, but I'm willing to learn if it means she'll have a chance. I'll do anything, just give me a sign," he murmured, his voice breaking, his face wet from the tears he no longer tried to hide. In that moment of total vulnerability, Briccio realized how willing he was to fight, to sacrifice everything for her. The pain of waiting seemed to lessen a little, as if the simple act of opening his heart had relieved some of the weight he was carrying. But the fear was still there, present in every thought, and he knew that soon he would have to face what fate had in store. It was then that the chapel door opened softly. The sound broke the silence, causing Briccio to raise his face, his heart racing. Dr. Henry was standing there with a grave expression and a tense posture, as if the news he brought was something that required care to be conveyed. Briccio took a deep breath, his heart racing even faster, and stood up, feeling his legs trembling, ready to hear whatever it was. "Doctor, please, tell me, how is she?" "Doctor." Henry took a deep breath, his shoulders hunched by the weight of what he needed to say. He glanced at Briccio, sadness evident on his face. "Mr. Briccio, we did everything in our power. Sarah's body did not respond as we had hoped. We tried every way, but I fear she is too weak. Little Sarah is at the very limit of what her body can endure." Briccio felt the ground disappear from under his feet. The doctor's words echoed in his mind, heavy and definitive, but he refused to accept them. He had fought so hard, believed so much. His mind tried to comprehend, but his heart could not. "So, that's it?" He tried to speak, but his voice barely came out as a whisper, the words almost choked by the pain. Dr. Henry hesitated, clearly reluctant to give a direct answer. "At this point, we have already exceeded all limits. The next stage of treatment is far too risky for someone so frail. I suggest you say goodbye to the girl," the doctor said with a lament. Briccio averted his gaze, the pain on his face evident, every feature revealing the intensity of what he was feeling. But deep down, something kept insisting within him. The memory of the prayer he had made, the sudden faith he had felt, all of it seemed to drive him forward. He couldn't explain it, but he needed to try. "Doctor, I know it seems impossible, but please try one last time," he said, with a determination that seemed to arise from a deep place. "I can't accept that this is the end. I don't know why, but I have this feeling, this faith. I believe she can overcome this." Dr. Henry observed him closely, surprised by the strength in Briccio's voice, and pondered for a moment. "Mr. Briccio, I understand how important this is for you, but you must understand. Her situation is extremely delicate. There is a chance that this final dose may do more harm than good. She will not survive another dose. Briccio nodded, the decision firm on his face. I understand, Doctor, but I can't help but try. Something inside me tells me she still has a chance. I just need you to believe in that too, even if it seems irrational. I feel. Something in my heart tells me we must try one more time. The doctor took a deep breath and, after a brief exchange of glances with the team, nodded slightly. Very well, Mr. Briccio. We will try one last time, but you must be aware that there are no guarantees. It may be too risky, and you will have to sign a liability waiver. Briccio nodded, his voice low but determined. I understand, Doctor. I know the risks, but I have to believe she still has a chance. I can't accept any other outcome. I'm sure she will survive. I've never been a man of faith, but I also feel quite different from the man I was before this child came into my life. I have faith. I believe she will make it. Dr. Henry asked the millionaire to follow him, and as they reached the room, he turned to the team and they quickly began preparing the last dose. The silence in the room was overwhelming, and Briccio watched every movement, every preparation with watchful eyes, as if his presence could influence the outcome. He held his breath, his heart beating painfully against his chest. As they administered the dose, the doctors remained silent, attentive to the monitors, and Briccio approached little Sarah's bed, watching her with tearful eyes. He whispered, almost voiceless, as if speaking directly to the girl. Sarah, I'm sure something much greater watches over you and all of us. I know you will make it. I have faith that we will succeed. The medical team monitored every small change in Sarah's vital signs. The room was filled with a tension that seemed to increase with every second. Sarah's fragility was evident, and the doctor's expressions reflected the apprehension over the extreme attempt. Briccio clasped his hands, trying to control his own anxiety. Dr. Henry cast him a serious but understanding look. Mr. Briccio, I know you're suffering, but we need her to react soon. Time is running out. She needs a quick response, or it may be too late. Briccio nodded, unable to take his eyes off Sarah. I understand, Doctor, and I thank you for being here. I know I've done everything I could, but now it's up to her. I just wanted her to know how much this means. He leaned down a little, bringing his face closer to the girl's, and whispered with all the emotion he felt. Sarah, maybe you don't understand now, but there's so much waiting for you. I promise that if you stay, I'll do everything to make your life filled with love, security, and peace. But I need you to give me that sign, little one. Stay, please. His words carried a sincerity and hope that surprised him. He had never thought he could open up so much, that his heart could be so touched by someone so fragile. He felt that somehow he had made a promise with every fiber of his being, and he couldn't fail her. The minutes ticked by and nothing seemed to change. The monitors showed fluctuating signs, but without significant improvement, and Briccio began to feel despair return. He looked at Dr. Henry, seeking some confirmation, but the doctor's expression was one of silent concern. Doctor, is there nothing else we can do? He asked, trying to hide the desperation in his voice, but not very successfully. Dr. Henry shook his head slowly, without words to comfort him. At this point, Mr. Briccio, it's all up to her. We're doing everything we can, but only she can fight now. Briccio felt his chest tighten. He closed his eyes, leaning closer to Sarah, and murmured again, his voice full of a tenderness he barely recognized in himself. Sarah, you're stronger than you think, I know that. And maybe it's time for you to believe that too. The room seemed plunged into a heavy silence, each second dragging with an almost painful intensity. The medical team watched in silence, and Briccio felt as though the world was trapped in an eternal moment, awaiting a sign, any response that could break that silence. And then, suddenly, a slight fluctuation appeared on the monitors. Dr. Henry looked at the signals, his eyes widening slightly as he watched the small increase in Sarah's heartbeats. Briccio held his breath, hope reigniting in his chest. Doctor, is that a sign? He asked, his voice almost trembling with so much contained relief. The doctor watched the monitors intently, not taking his eyes off them. It seems so, Mr. Briccio. She's showing some reaction. Bricio leaned closer, his eyes fixed on Sarah, and then he noticed something that almost made him fall to his knees. Her eyes, small and delicate, were beginning to open slowly, as if waking from a long sleep. That small gesture was all he needed, the sign of life he had longed for. "Sarah," he murmured, feeling tears well up in his eyes as a hesitant smile appeared on his face. "You made it, little one. You're here with me." In that moment, all the pain, all the waiting, and all the uncertainty transformed into pure hope, and he knew that, no matter how long the journey, they would face every new challenge together. After days of tension and hope, the hospital finally seemed a lighter place for Bricio. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. Sarah, for the first time, was breathing without the aid of the machines, her vital signs stable, and her skin, once so pale, now beginning to show a faint, rosy hue. Every small progress was a victory, and he watched her with a smile he couldn't contain. By her bedside, Bricio held her little hand, unable to look away. "You did it, Sarah," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "You fought and won. And I don't know how to thank you for that." He leaned closer, his face inches from hers, observing every detail with an almost reverent tenderness. He felt as though a part of himself was being healed along with her, as if each steady beat of Sarah's little heart restored a part of him. The mere fact that she was there, alive and fighting, brought him a peace he had never imagined. When she opened her eyes again, still weak but alert, Bricio saw a spark there that he would never forget. She looked at him, small and frail, but full of life, and he felt something profound form within him. Sarah offered him a smile, the first real smile after so many struggles, and Bricio could barely hold back his tears. She was recovering, she was there, and he allowed himself to believe that the worst was over. "That smile is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," he whispered, gently holding her little hand. "You're a warrior, Sarah, and I promise I'll do everything to protect you." The days that followed were filled with small miracles. Sarah began to gain strength, and soon she was responding to the medical team's care. Bricio's laughter and Sarah's delighted reactions filled the room, transforming the once fear-filled environment into a refuge of joy and hope. He told her stories, invented little adventures, and with each new moment he saw the bond between them grow, as if that love had been forged by all the suffering and overcoming. One afternoon, while talking to one of the doctors, he received the news he had been waiting for with bated breath. Sarah was being released to go home. The doctor, with a smile on his face, confirmed that the worst was over. Now it was simply a matter of ensuring that she continued to grow stronger. "So she's, cured?" Bricio asked, his voice trembling with relief and joy. The doctor nodded. "Yes, Mr. Bricio. She responded well to the treatment. Now the most important thing is for her to receive care and plenty of love." He laughed, holding Sarah's little hand, and looked at her with an intensity that expressed everything he felt. "That, doctor, is a promise I can keep." When the day finally came to take her home, Bricio dressed Sarah in a new onesie and cradled her in his arms with a tenderness that reflected the strength of the love he now felt for her. With every step he took toward the hospital exit, he felt as though a new life was beginning for both of them. The sunlight awaiting them outside seemed to shine more intensely, and he looked at her, watching everything around her with innocent curiosity. "Look, Sarah. Finally we can go home," he said, with a broad smile, emotion overflowing in every word. In the car, he held her carefully while looking out the window, his heart still full of apprehension as the driver took them to the mansion. Upon arriving home, he prepared a special space for her. He wanted to have her close by to ensure that nothing would ever put her in danger again. With great care, he placed her in the crib he had meticulously prepared, adjusting the blankets around her. Sarah looked at him with eyes full of innocence and trust, and he knew she depended completely on his care and love. "I know you don't understand now, but you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, little one," he whispered, with a tenderness almost unfamiliar to him. "I promise I'll be everything you need." That night, Bricio remained by her side, lulling her with soft songs until she fell asleep. Even after Sarah fell asleep, he continued there, unable to leave her side. Every little movement she made, every breath was proof to him that she was all right. Even knowing she was safe, the fear still haunted him. He gently stroked her little face, and then let himself sink into the armchair beside the crib, exhausted but at peace. Sleep overtook him before he could resist. He fell asleep right there with his hand still resting on the edge of the crib, his heart finally light. He dreamed of Sarah, imagining a future where she grew, played and laughed, free and protected. In his dream, she ran to him and hugged him, and he held her, knowing he would never let her go. As the early hours gave way to the light of dawn, Bricio was awakened by a sense of unease. He blinked a few times, trying to focus his eyes, and rose from the armchair, stretching. The room was quiet, and the silence seemed heavier than usual. He looked at the crib, expecting to see Sarah sleeping peacefully. But what he saw made him freeze immediately. The crib was empty. The blankets were slightly rumpled, but there was no sign of her. Bricio's heart raced, and he rushed to the crib, his mind struggling to process what was happening. It was as if the air had disappeared, every fiber of his being gripped by an overwhelming panic. "Sarah?" he called, his voice broken by fear, as if he could bring her back just by saying her name. He looked around the room, searching for any sign, any clue as to where she might be. But the space was empty. Without a second thought, he left the room, checking the hallway, his hurried steps and pounding heart. A feeling of helplessness overcame him, and despair began to take hold. "Sarah, where are you?" he shouted, his voice echoing through the house, the fear showing in every syllable. He began to search every corner, opening doors, checking every room. The idea of losing her again, of her being out of his reach, made the panic grow within him. Bricio felt his heart pounding in his chest as he ran from room to room of the mansion. Panic clouded his thoughts, and every step echoed like a frightening reminder that Sarah was still missing. Every door he opened, every empty corridor increased his anguish. He was on the verge of collapse, his mind haunted by the darkest possibilities. "Sarah, where are you, little one?" he yelled, his voice echoing through the empty hallways. It was hard for him to believe that, after all their suffering, she had simply disappeared. This can't be happening, not after everything. He entered the main hall, his face tense, his eyes scanning every corner, searching for any sign that could indicate where she might have gone. He ran to the living room, checking behind furniture, under tables, but the silence and emptiness of the place only reinforced his despair. The mansion, once a refuge, now seemed a cold and threatening labyrinth, where every empty room echoed her absence. Bricio stopped for a moment in the middle of the hall, his whole body trembling. She was here. I left her here. Safe. How could... Refusing to lose hope, he moved swiftly down the hallway to the bedrooms, opening doors and turning on lights. He rushed to the guest room, opening closets and curtains, as if there was somewhere she could be hiding. But each attempt left him more frustrated and without an answer. Suddenly, he remembered the room where he kept antique items, a room that was almost never used. In a hurry, he ran there, forcefully opening the door. The room was dark and empty, but he still searched every corner, moving objects and pushing furniture aside in the hope that, for some reason, she would be there. However, the space remained desolate, with no sign of her. "This makes no sense." No one came in. The house was secure, he muttered to himself, trying to remain calm, but every second that passed increased his anguish. As he left the room, he found one of the mansion's security guards. Without a second thought, Bricio grabbed him by the arm, his face full of urgency. "Did you see anyone coming in? Any strange movement?" "Sarah? My daughter, she's gone missing from her room." He spoke quickly, his words tumbling over each other, as he waited for the man to have an answer. The guard shook his head, confused and alarmed. "Mr. Bricio, no one came in or out since last night. I was on duty myself." "I didn't see anything out of the ordinary." Bricio looked at him disbelieving. "But that doesn't make sense. She was there, sleeping in her crib, and now she's gone." He clenched his fists, frustration growing as the reality became increasingly disturbing. Determined to find some answer, he headed to the security monitoring room, where the mansion's camera monitors were arranged on a wall. His heart raced as he scanned the footage, looking for any clue as to what might have happened. He reviewed every angle, every hallway and entrance. "I need to see everything. Any sign of her, anything out of place," he told the guard, who quickly began to review the night's recordings. The cameras showed the mansion's hallways in complete tranquility, nothing but shadows dancing as the nightlight passed through the windows. It seemed impossible that anyone could have entered without being seen. Each passing image only increased Bricio's anguish. After a few minutes, an unusual shadow appeared on one of the camera screens. It was a subtle movement, an almost indistinguishable figure, but clearly a human form. It moved down the hallway, passing by Sarah's room entrance. Bricio leaned closer to the screen, his eyes wide, his heart pounding. "Wait! Rewind the footage!" he almost shouted, his voice laden with anxiety and despair. The guard paused the video, and Bricio studied the figure carefully. There was no way to see the face, but it was undeniable that someone had been in the mansion. A female figure with long hair, who seemed to wander through the house with slow and calculated steps. The blurred image heightened the mystery, but one thing was clear. Someone had been near Sarah's room. "Who is this?" "You said no one entered the mansion," he questioned, his tone hardening. He felt betrayed, his trust shattered. The guard, equally surprised and confused, stammered a response. I don't know, sir. There's no record of anyone entering, no movement at the gates. It could be a problem with the camera." Bricio didn't want to hear explanations. He could only think of one thing. Sarah was in danger, and that figure could be the key to finding out where she was. "This is not a camera problem. I want you to check every recording, every second. This person came in here and took my daughter," he demanded, feeling his voice falter. The guard nodded, frightened by Bricio's intensity. Together they continued watching, rewinding the cameras in search of any other clues. Bricio barely blinked, his attention completely focused on the screens. Every cell in his body ready to act the moment he discovered something else. The shaky image of the figure seemed to float through the mansion, moving like a ghostly presence. The figure appeared to know the space, each step planned. There was no hesitation in the movements. It passed through the hallways with a familiarity that made Bricio shudder. Whoever it was, they knew exactly where to go and what to do. "How could no one have seen this?" he muttered, his gaze fixed on the screen as the figure approached Sarah's room. She went straight to her room. This person knew where she was going. The cameras showed the figure approaching the door and then disappearing from view. Bricio's heart raced at the thought that, at that very moment, Sarah was just a few meters away from him, alone and defenseless. He clenched his hands, his thoughts in a whirlwind as he tried to process what it all meant. "What does this person want with my daughter?" he whispered to himself, his voice filled with deep anguish and fury. The camera in the next hallway showed nothing else. The figure had vanished from the footage. Bricio felt frustrated, the tension and helplessness rising. He looked at the guard, his eyes burning with anger and fear. How did this happen? "I want answers." Bricio was about to repeat the question to the guard, who had no answer, when a soft and distressing sound froze him in place. It was a cry, a familiar baby's cry. He turned abruptly, his heart pounding as he recognized Sarah's sound. Relief and confusion mingled as he tried to pinpoint where that sound was coming from. An echo that seemed to fill every corner of the mansion. His eyes widened, and without thinking he began to run toward where the crying grew louder. The security guard, still dazed and mumbling apologies amid stutters, hurriedly followed him, while Bricio ignored everything around him, focused only on finding Sarah. They walked through the mansion's corridors until they reached a room near the back entrance where the sound seemed clearer. Sarah's crying was unmistakable, and Bricio's heart filled with desperate hope. He grabbed the doorknob and with a quick pull opened the door. There, in the middle of the dimly lit room, was a female figure sitting on the floor, holding Sarah in her arms. It was Karina, the woman he had helped on the street. Bricio stood in shock for a second, watching her hold Sarah with a desperate tenderness, her face marked by tears as she looked at the girl as if that were the last moment she could spend with her. The sight of the two left him paralyzed, a mixture of surprise and understanding slowly arising as he assimilated the scene before him. "Karina?" he murmured, incredulous, the name coming out as a whisper. Karina slowly raised her eyes, surprised and frightened to see Bricio there. Her eyes were reddened, her skin pale, and there was something in her gaze that Bricio could only interpret as a deep, almost resigned sadness. She tried to wipe away her tears, but her voice came out choked when she tried to explain herself. I'm sorry for coming in like this, Bricio," she stammered, holding Sarah even tighter, as if fearing he would immediately take her away from her arms. I needed to see her one more time before leaving. I needed to say goodbye to my daughter one more time. Bricio remained silent, watching Karina and trying to understand the depth of that scene, in a state of shock. He had found her in such a different situation before, fragile and helpless. Now seeing her there with Sarah, with the look of a mother who was saying goodbye to her daughter, caused him a mixture of emotions that he didn't know how to process. "Karina, are you really Sarah's mother?" he asked, his voice soft but full of astonishment. She nodded slowly, the gesture full of sadness as more tears streamed down her face. "Yes, I am her mother, but I can no longer be who she needs." Karina tried to smile, but the smile was only a shadow, something that seemed to dissipate with the pain. I just wanted to be able to hold her one last time. I wanted to say goodbye." Bricio remained silent, observing her with an intensity that mixed empathy and compassion. He took a few slow steps towards her, trying to convey that he did not judge her, that he understood the pain she carried. He felt torn between the urge to protect Sarah and the understanding of the undeniable bond between mother and daughter that was revealed at that moment. "You could have asked me, Karina," he said, his voice almost a whisper. I would have understood. I would have allowed you to see her." She shook her head, still holding Sarah tightly, and swallowed hard before answering. "I know, but I was afraid you wouldn't let me see her. I can't give Sarah what she needs, what she deserves. I saw what you did for her, I knew. I just wanted her to have a real chance to live, and that happened thanks to you." Bricio felt his chest tighten. He had already felt a deep connection with Sarah, but now he understood even more the pain of that mother who was sacrificing everything to give her daughter a better life. Karina caressed the little girl's face, her gaze a mixture of love and despair. "Karina, are you sure?" he asked, trying not to let his own nervousness show. "She's your daughter. You can still be here for her." Karina lowered her head, her shoulders hunched by the weight of a decision that clearly consumed her. "I have a terminal condition. They said that I wouldn't make it past today," she confessed, her voice weak, almost inaudible. "I left Sarah here because I knew she would be safe, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave without seeing her one last time." She raised her gaze to Bricio, her eyes filled with an indescribable pain. "I know it was wrong to enter like this, but she's all I have, and you're the only person I could trust to take care of her," she murmured. Bricio felt a lump in his throat. He observed Karina holding Sarah with a mother's love, the kind of love he had never witnessed with such intensity. Not knowing what else to say, he drew closer, extending his hand towards the child, but allowing Karina to maintain control, respecting that last moment between mother and daughter. Karina, breathing deeply, looked at her daughter with a resigned sadness. She kissed Sarah's little face, murmuring words of affection that seemed to come from the depths of her soul. "My little one, I love you so much. I will always be with you somehow." At that moment, Karina began to lose her strength. Her breathing became labored, and she swayed slightly, almost falling to the side. Bricio, in a quick reflex, extended his arms to support her, and she slid into his arms, still holding Sarah. Her skin was cold, and he realized that her time was truly running out. "Karina!" he called, his voice gripped by panic as he held her frail and weakened body. She still held Sarah in her arms, but her gaze already seemed distant, almost glazed over. She looked at him one last time, with a soft and grateful smile. "Take care of her. Please, make sure she has a life that I could never give her," she murmured before her body gave way completely, surrendering to the darkness. Bricio felt Karina's weight in his arms, and at that moment an overwhelming emotion consumed him. He could barely process what was happening, but he knew he had promised to take care of Sarah, and now, more than ever, he would be the only person to protect and love her. Bricio swiftly took the baby into his arms and carried her to his car. Then he picked up Karina in his arms, feeling the growing frailty in her body. He observed her, noting the paleness, the eyes struggling to stay open, the irregular and labored breathing. A wave of despair washed over him, but there was no room for hesitation. He knew he had to act quickly. "Karina, don't give up now," he whispered, His voice choked as he tried to maintain control. "I'll help you. I promise. You'll be okay." The security guard watched the scene, paralyzed. Briccio acted without a second thought. He had already dismissed the driver, so he drove his own car and sped toward the same hospital where Sarah had been treated, driving as if every second made all the difference, and he knew it did. The journey was a blur, and his only focus was reaching the doctor who had given Sarah a second chance. He could barely breathe, his mind filled with a fierce determination. Upon arrival, Briccio leaped out of the car and, carrying the baby in his arms, rushed inside, desperately calling for the doctor to get Karina onto a stretcher. The reception staff, recognizing him and seeing the despair on his face, quickly helped him locate Dr. Henry, who appeared at the end of the corridor, his expression one of concern. "Dr. Henry, I need your help. Karina. She's Sarah's mother. She has the same disease my daughter faced. Please, you have to help her too, but today, it might be her last day. Please try to save her. This girl can still have a mother who loves her," Briccio pleaded, his voice trembling and his eyes fixed on the doctor. Dr. Henry nodded, seeing the urgency in Briccio's eyes and sensing the gravity of the situation. "We'll take her to the emergency room. I'll do everything in my power, but we need to act quickly." The medical team placed Karina on a stretcher and began preparing her for emergency treatment, monitoring her vital signs and adjusting the equipment. Briccio watched closely, observing every movement and preparation, with a desperate hope that she could receive the same miracle Sarah had received. He knew she was much weaker and that the disease seemed to have progressed, but he couldn't and wouldn't give up on her. As Dr. Henry checked the initial tests, Briccio approached the stretcher and held Karina's hand with his free hand while cradling the sleeping Sarah in his arm, feeling the icy touch of the girl's mother's skin. He leaned in to speak to her, his voice laden with an almost painful urgency. "Karina, you fought so hard to bring Sarah to me, to give her a better life. Now it's your turn to fight for yourself," he whispered, his face so close to hers that he could feel her shallow breathing. "Please, stay with me. Sarah still needs you. I need you too." Dr. Henry began administering the same experimental treatment that had been used on Sarah, although aware of the heightened risks due to the advanced stage of the disease. He gave Briccio a look filled with seriousness and caution. "Mr. Briccio, you need to understand. Her condition is very serious. We'll try, but the chances are extremely slim. In fact, they're almost non-existent," the doctor explained, his voice solemn. Briccio nodded, tightening his grip on Karina's hand. "I understand, doctor, but if there's any chance at all, no matter how small, I need you to try." The treatment began, and Briccio remained by Karina's side, refusing to leave her for even a moment. He watched every procedure, each monitor being adjusted, the line of the heart monitor oscillating irregularly. His eyes were fixed on those numbers and traces, almost as if he could, with his will, keep her alive, while holding her daughter in his arms. "You've been through so much, Karina. I've seen the strength you have," he whispered to her, trying to hold back tears. "Sarah is here alive because of you, because of everything you did for her. Now it's time for you to accept that love back." The atmosphere was charged with tension, and Briccio felt every second like a blow, a struggle against time. The medical team tried to stabilize Karina, administering medications and adjusting respiratory support, but her vital signs remained unstable. It was a silent and brutal combat, and he felt the weight of every minute that passed. "Please, Karina, don't leave me now," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. "Not after everything. I promise I'll take care of you, just like you took care of Sarah." The minutes ticked by, and Dr. Henry continued fighting against the worsening of Karina's condition, adjusting her medication, trying to stabilize the heart monitor. Briccio watched every move the doctor made, almost as if he could absorb some of the pain and effort. The seconds passed like hours, and every moment Briccio spent by Karina's side was a mixture of hope and despair. He watched her pale, fragile face intently, wondering how someone who had shown such strength could now be in such a vulnerable state. In his mind, he revisited every moment he'd known Karina, from their first meeting to the instant she'd decided to leave Sarah at his home. The mother he knew wouldn't give up, but Karina's body was exhausted, and that terrified him. "Karina, I know you're tired, but please, just a little longer," he murmured, feeling his voice catch. "Sarah is here, and she needs you. I need you. Doctor..." Henry moved with precision around her, adjusting the equipment, monitoring her vitals, trying to stabilize Karina's exhausted body. Briccio watched the doctor's attentive eyes, searching them for any sign of hope. He knew, Doctor. Henry was doing everything he could, but the gravity of the situation was clear with every attempt to stabilize her vital signs. "She's fighting, Mr. Briccio, but we need her body to respond to the treatment," the doctor said softly as he made new adjustments to the respiratory support. "We're not giving up, but the situation is critical." Briccio nodded, his heart tight, and held Karina's hand again as if the contact could transmit the strength he wanted her to feel. Every time the monitor beeped or showed a fluctuation, the fear grew, but he refused to let it unsettle him. He needed to stay calm, needed Karina to feel his presence, to know he was there for her, just as she had always been for Sarah. But then, suddenly, the monitor emitted a shrill signal, and the graph lines showed a sharp drop. Karina was dying. The monitor sounded an alert, and the lines that had previously moved irregularly began to oscillate more and more intensely. Briccio watched, his heart in his throat, as the medical team worked tirelessly to stabilize Karina while the monitors beeped. Every second seemed to last an eternity, and he held Sarah in his arms as if she were his only anchor point in the storm of emotions. He knew he was facing a decisive moment, one where Karina's life hung by a thread. He took deep breaths, barely containing his tears, as he murmured silent words of encouragement, both for Karina and for himself. Finally, after what seemed like an endless struggle, the monitor beside Karina stabilized. The medical team relaxed, indicating that against all odds they had managed to save her. Briccio felt an overwhelming wave of relief and gratitude, his legs trembling as he watched Karina. She was still unconscious, but her vital signs were strong and regular, a miracle he could barely believe had happened. With Sarah in his arms, Briccio approached Karina's bedside, tears finally streaming down his face. He needed to speak, needed to tell her everything that had been stored in his chest, even though she still couldn't hear him. Kneeling beside her, he began to speak, the words flowing like a confession of everything he had been feeling. "Karina, I don't know if you can hear me, but I need you to know some things," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "From the moment you left Sarah with me, my life changed completely. I never imagined I would be able to care for someone like that someone so small could occupy such a big space in my heart. I became a different person because of her, because of both of you." He paused for a moment, watching Karina's pale face as he held Sarah more tightly. "I know life has never been fair to you. I know you've been through things no one should have to go through. And yet, you were strong. You were so strong, Karina. You fought with everything you had to secure your daughter's future, and today, because of that fight, she's here, alive and healthy." Briccio felt a lump in his throat, but continued, knowing he needed to get everything out. "I know you thought you wouldn't have more time, that this was your last day. But something inside me told me that you weren't alone, that there was still a chance, and to see you here breathing. This is a miracle, Karina. A miracle I will never forget." He gently stroked her forehead, a delicate gesture conveying the affection and gratitude he felt. "I promise I'll do everything I can so that you never feel alone again. I'll be here for you, for Sarah. We'll build this family together, and I won't let you have to do it all alone, never again." Sarah murmured something in his arms, and Briccio looked down, his heart tight. "This little one here, she's an extension of you, Karina. Every time I look at her, I'll remember your strength, your love, because you risked everything to give her a better life. And I will honor that sacrifice every day of my life." Briccio wiped his eyes, but the tears kept flowing. He smiled, emotional as he spoke. "Karina, you may think all of this was just a mistake, that your life was a sequence of difficult and painful things, but it wasn't. You brought a child into the world who brought light into my life, who made me understand what it really means to love and care for someone. That's a legacy, Karina. A legacy no one can take away from you." He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "And now that we're here together, I want you to know that you can trust me. You can rest. You can heal. Without fear. Sarah will grow up knowing she has a brave mother. A mother who faced everything for her, who fought against the impossible, Bricio's eyes locked onto Karina's face, and he continued, his voice heavy with determination. I swore to myself that I would do anything for Sarah, but now, Karina, I want to do this for you too. Because you deserve to live. You deserve to be here to watch your daughter grow up, to witness all the small miracles she still has to bring. And I will be by your side, every step of the way, every single day. Sarah stirred in his arms, and Bricio smiled through the tears, feeling grateful and vulnerable at the same time. Look, even she knows you're here, that you still have so much to live for. We're going to take care of you, Karina. Sarah and I, we'll be a family, and I won't let anything take you away from us. He took Karina's hand with a gentle firmness, like a silent promise. I know you didn't imagine this future, but now it's within reach. You have a new chance, and I'll be here to make sure you have the support and love you've always deserved. Bricio lowered his head, letting the tears flow freely. He allowed himself to feel every emotion, every fear, every hope. He knew that moment was a gift, a fresh start for the three of them. And with Sarah in his arms and Karina by his side, he finally felt complete, ready to face whatever came their way from then on. Days later, still in treatment, Karina slowly opened her eyes, as if awakening from a deep dream, and felt strangely light, as if the weight she had carried for so long had vanished. The soft light of the hospital room enveloped her, and the first thing she saw was Bricio's anxious face, holding her hand with a look full of hope and concern. She blinked, trying to focus, and noticed Sarah nestled safely in his arms as the doctor approached slowly. Karina, I'm glad you're awake, the doctor said with a calm smile. We have good news. Against all odds, your body responded very well to the treatment. You've recovered, and now you just need rest and follow-up care. This moment here is a victory. Karina was silent for a few seconds, absorbing those words with a mixture of shock and relief. She had never imagined she would have a second chance, let alone after the difficult days she had been through recently. She felt her eyes well up, and with difficulty turned her gaze to Bricio, who was still watching her with an expression of pure emotion. He had been by her side the whole time. She could feel it. She took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice still weak but determined. Bricio, I heard everything you said while I was unconscious. Every word you said gave me strength, made me want to keep going even when I thought there was no hope left. I need you to know what that means to me, and what you did for me and Sarah. Karina looked at Sarah in Bricio's arms, a soft smile emerging amidst the tears. I was dying, Bricio, and I knew my time was running out, but I needed to hold my daughter one last time. That's why that night I entered your house without thinking of the consequences. I thought it would be the last time I would see her. I thought it was the end. She paused, looking directly at Bricio, her voice laden with deep and sincere gratitude. But then, you now, tell me that not only did you save my daughter, you also saved me. When I had already given up on everything, you didn't give up on me. You did for me what I thought no one would ever do, and I don't know how to thank you. You didn't just save my daughter. You gave me a new chance at life, something I never thought I would have. Bricio squeezed her hand, tears rolling down his face as he heard every word, his heart overflowing with compassion and admiration. Karina paused, and amid the silence that surrounded them, she spoke again, her voice soft but determined. Because of you, Bricio, I regained my faith. You showed me that kindness exists, that I can be cared for, and that my daughter can have a happy life. I never thought I would see this day. But today, thanks to you, I'm here. And no matter how hard I try, I know I can never repay everything you did for me and Sarah. She took a deep breath, letting the tears flow freely now. I am eternally grateful. And if there is anything I can promise you, it is that I will give my all to be worthy of this new chance. Thank you, Bricio, for believing, for fighting, and for giving us a future that I never imagined. Bricio lowered his head, feeling moved and blessed by everything she had shared. He knew at that moment that their lives had changed forever, and that together they would form the family they had always dreamed of. Months passed since Karina woke up in the hospital, and the life that she, Bricio, and Sarah built together blossomed with a happiness that none of the three had imagined possible. Karina still became emotional when remembering the days when everything seemed lost, when fate led her to Bricio, and he, with his generosity, brought light to what was once darkness. The time and love he dedicated to Sarah and to her herself became the foundation of a new beginning. In the first few months, Karina and Bricio shared a coexistence marked by friendship and mutual support. The care for Sarah brought them even closer, and Karina realized each day how dedicated and attentive Bricio was, not just as a father to Sarah, but as a companion and friend to her. The conversations became longer, the family moments more meaningful, and the connection between them grew in a natural and inevitable way. As the weeks went by, what was once friendship and gratitude turned into something deeper and more intense. Bricio began to realize that his heart beat differently when he was near Karina. She made him laugh, made him feel complete, and brought out a side of himself that he didn't even know existed. Karina, in turn, felt Bricio's love in every gesture, in every look, and in the way he embraced her story and her vulnerabilities. Finally, one night, while Sarah slept peacefully in her crib, Bricio and Karina were in the living room exchanging smiles and memories about everything they had been through. In a moment of silence, Bricio held her hand, looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her feel completely safe. "Karina," he began, his voice soft and sincere, "I think fate brought us together in a way I never could have imagined. You and Sarah have changed my life in ways I can't put into words, and today, I can no longer imagine my life without you two. I love you, Karina, and I want us to be a real family." Karina felt tears welling up in her eyes, but this time they were tears of happiness. She smiled and held his hand tenderly. "Bricio, you gave us a second chance at life, a chance to dream of a future. I love you too, and I couldn't want anything more than to share my life by your side." They embraced tenderly, and that moment was the confirmation that they had both found what they needed most: each other. From that day on, Bricio, Karina, and Sarah began to build a life together, a life filled with love, support, and complicity. The friendship that united them transformed into a solid and true love which grew every day. Sarah, now stronger and healthier, brought joy and laughter to the house. Together they shared simple and precious moments, from Sarah's first steps to celebrating the small advances each one made. Karina found in Bricio the love she had always dreamed of, and Bricio discovered by her side a happiness he never thought possible. Months turned into years, and their happiness only increased. As a true family, they faced the challenges that arose, always with the certainty that they were together. The love that united them was stronger than any obstacle, and together Karina, Bricio, and Sarah lived a full life, filled with love, gratitude, and hope. And so, in a house full of laughter, affection, and unity, they found happiness in every small moment shared. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to continue bringing exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We are immensely grateful to have you here with us. Now you can click on the links that are appearing on the screen right now. We have a special selection just for you, full of valuable stories and guaranteed entertainment. See you there.